In 1968, the Beatles were in India. America was wrapped in a blanket of rage. Students at universities were wrecking parked cars, smashing windows. The war in Vietnam was sending the country into a deep depression. The cities were in flames. The bludgeons were coming down. Hard-hat union guys were beating kids with baseball bats. The fictitious Don Juan, the mysterious medicine man from Mexico, had become a new consciousness craze, had brought in a new level of awareness or life force and was wielding it like a machete. Acid tests were in full swing. Acid was giving people the right attitude. The new worldview was changing society and everything was moving fast, lickety-split. If you saw the news, you'd think that the whole nation was on fire. It seemed like every day there was a whole new riot in another city, everything on the edge of danger and change. The jungles of America being cleared away. Things that had used to be in traditional black and white were now exploding in full sunny color. I had been in a motorcycle accident and I'd been hurt, but I recovered. Truth was, I wanted to get out of the rat race. Having children changed my life and segregated me from just about everybody and everything that was going on. Outside of my family, nothing held any real interest for me, and I was seeing everything through different glasses. Even the horrifying news items of the day, the gunning down of the Kennedys, King, Malcolm X, I didn't see them as leaders being shot down, but rather as fathers whose families had been left wounded. Being born and raised in America, the country of freedom and independence, I had always cherished the values and ideals of equality and liberty. I was determined to raise my children with those ideals. A few years earlier, Ronnie Gilbert, one of the Weavers, had introduced me at one of the Newport folk festivals saying, "And here he is. Take him. You know him. He's yours." I had failed to sense the ominous forebodings in the introduction. Elvis had never been introduced like that. Take him, he's yours? What a crazy thing to say. Screw that. As far as I knew, I didn't belong to anybody, then or now. I had a wife and children whom I loved more than anything else in the world. I was trying to provide for them, keep out of trouble, but the big bugs in the press kept promoting me as the mouthpiece, spokesman, or even conscience of a generation. That was funny. All I'd ever done was sing songs that were dead straight and expressed powerful new realities. I had very little in common with and knew even less about a generation I was supposed to be the voice of. I'd left my hometown only 10 years earlier. Wasn't vociferating the opinions of anybody. My destiny lay down the road with whatever life invited, had nothing to do with representing any kind of civilization. Being true to yourself, that was the thing. I was more a cowpuncher than a Pied Piper. People think that fame and riches translate into power, that it brings glory and honor and happiness. Maybe it does, but sometimes it doesn't. I found myself stuck in Woodstock, vulnerable and with a family to protect. If you looked in the press, though, you saw me being portrayed as anything but that. It was surprising how thick the smoke had become. It seems like the world has always needed a scapegoat, someone to lead the charge against the Roman Empire. But America wasn't the Roman Empire, and someone else would have to step up and volunteer. I really was never any more than what I was, a folk musician who gazed into the gray mist with tear-blinded eyes and made up songs that floated in a luminous haze. Now it had blown up in my face and was hanging over me. I wasn't a preacher performing miracles. It would have driven anybody mad. Early on, Woodstock had been a quiet refuge, but now no more. Road maps to our homestead must have been posted in all 50 states for gangs of dropouts and druggies. Moochers showed up from as far away as California on pilgrimages. Goons were breaking into our place all hours of the night. At first it was merely the nomadic homeless making illegal entry. Seemed harmless enough, but then the rogue radicals looking for the prince of protest began to arrive. I wanted to set fire to these people. These gatecrashers, spooks, trespassers, demagogues were all disrupting my home life, and it was backing me into a corner. Once in the midsummer madness, I was riding in a car with Robbie Robertson, the guitar player in what was later to be called the band. I felt like I might as well have been living in another part of the solar system. He says to me, "Where do you think you're going to take it?" I said, "Take what?" "You know, the whole music scene." "The whole music scene?" The car window was rolled down about an inch. I rolled it down the rest of the way, felt a gust of wind blow into my face, and waited for what he said to die away. It was like dealing with a conspiracy. No place was far enough away. I don't know what everybody else was fantasizing about, but what I was fantasizing about was a 9-to-5 existence, a house on a tree-lined block with a white picket fence, Pink roses in the backyard, that would have been nice. That was my deepest dream. After a while, you learn that privacy is something you can sell, but you can't buy it back. Woodstock had turned into a nightmare, a place of chaos. Now it was time to scramble out of there in search of some new silver lining, and that was what we did. We moved to New York City for a while in hopes to demolish my identity, but it wasn't any better there. It was even worse. Demonstrators found our house and paraded up and down the front of it chanting and shouting, demanding for me to come out and lead them somewhere. Stop shirking my duties as the conscience of a generation. The neighbors hated us. To them it must have seemed like I was something out of a carnival show, some exhibition in the Palace of Wonders. They would stare at me when they saw me, like they'd stare at a shrunken head or a giant jungle rat. I pretended that I didn't care. Eventually we tried moving west, tried a few different places, but in short time reporters would come sniffing around in hopes to gain some secret. Maybe I'd confess some sin. Even if these reporters had been allowed in the house, what would they find? A whole lot of stuff. Stacking toys, push and pull toys, child-sized tables and chairs, big empty cardboard boxes, science kits, puzzles, and toy drums. I wasn't going to let anybody in the house. As for house rules, we didn't have many. If the kids wanted to play basketball in the kitchen, they played basketball in the kitchen. If they got into pots and pans, we put all the pots and pans on the floor. My house was chaotic inside as well as out. Joan Baez recorded a protest song about me that was getting big play, challenging me to get with it, come out and take charge, lead the masses, be an advocate, lead the crusade. The song called out to me from the radio like a public service announcement. The press never let up. Reporters would shoot questions at me, and I would tell them repeatedly that I was not a spokesman for anything or anybody, and I was only a musician. My wife, when she married me, had no idea of what she was getting into. Me neither, actually, and now we were in a no-win situation. For sure my lyrics had struck nerves that had never been struck before, but if my songs were just about the words, then what was Dwayne Eddy, the great rock and roll guitarist, doing recording an album full of instrumental melodies in my songs? Musicians have always known that my songs are about more than just words, but most people are not musicians. What I had to do was recondition my mind and stop putting the blame on external forces. I had to educate myself, get rid of some baggage. The solitude of time was what I didn't have. Whatever the counterculture was, I'd seen enough of it. I was sick of the way my lyrics had been extrapolated, their meaning subverted into polemics, and that I had been anointed as the Big Bubba of rebellion, high priest of protest, the Tsar of dissent, the Duke of disobedience, leader of the freeloaders, Kaiser of apostasy, Archbishop of anarchy, the Big Cheese. What the hell are we talking about? Horrible titles any way you want to look at it. All code words for outlaw. It was tough moving around, like the Merle Haggard song. I'm on the run, the highway is my home. I don't know if Haggard ever had to get his family out with him, but I know I did. It's a little different when you have to do that. The landscape burned behind us. The press was in no hurry to retract their judgment, and I just couldn't lie there. Had to take the bull by the horns myself and remodel the image of me. Change the perception of it anyway. There aren't any rules to cover an emergency of this kind. This was a new thing for me, and I wasn't used to thinking this way. I'd have to send out deviating signals, crank up the wrecking train, create some different impressions. At first I was only able to do little things, local things, tactics really. Unexpected things like pouring a bottle of whiskey over my head and walking into a department store and act pie-eyed, knowing that everyone would be talking amongst themselves when I left. I was hoping that the news would spread. What mattered to me most was getting breathing room for my family. The whole spectral world could go to hell. My outer image would have to be something a bit more confusing, a bit more humdrum. It's hard to live like this. It takes all your effort. The first thing that has to go is any form of artistic self-expression that's dear to you. Art is unimportant next to life, and you have no choice. I had no hunger for it anymore anyway. Creativity has much to do with experience, observation, and imagination, and if any one of those key elements is missing, it doesn't work. It was impossible now for me to observe anything without being observed. In Woodstock, I'd be out in the yard and a car would come rolling up. Some guy would jump out of the passenger side, point in my direction and walk away, and a bunch of sightseers would then come down the hill. My house was being battered, ravens constantly croaking ill omens at our door. What kind of alchemy, I wondered, could create a perfume that would make a reaction to a person lukewarm, indifferent, apathetic? I wanted to get some. I had never intended to be on the road of heavy consequences, and I didn't like it. I wasn't the toastmaster of any generation, and that notion needed to be pulled up by its roots. Liberty for myself and my loved ones had to be secured. I had no time to kill, and I didn't like what was being thrown at me. This main meal of garbage had to be mixed up with some butter and mushrooms, and I'd have to go to great lengths to do it. You gotta start somewhere. I went to Jerusalem, got myself photographed at the Western Wall wearing a skull cap. The image was transmitted worldwide instantly, and quickly all the great rags changed me overnight into a Zionist. This helped a little. Coming back, I quickly recorded what appeared to be a country western record and made sure it sounded pretty bridled and housebroken. The music press didn't know what to make of it. I used a different voice, too. People scratched their heads. I started a rumor with my record company that I would be quitting music and going to college, the Rhode Island School of Design. Stories were printed about me trying to find myself, that I was on some eternal search, that I was suffering some kind of internal torment. It all sounded good to me. I released one album, a double one, where I just threw everything I could think of at the wall, and whatever stuck, released it, and then went back and scooped up everything that didn't stick and released that too. I missed out on Woodstock, just wasn't there. Altamont, Sympathy for the Devil, missed that too. Eventually I would even record an entire album based on Chekhov short stories. Critics thought it was autobiographical. That was fine. I played a part in a movie, wore cowboy duds, and galloped down the road. Not much required there. I guess I was naive. The novelist Herman Melville's work went largely unnoticed after Moby Dick. Critics thought that he crossed the literary line and recommended burning Moby Dick. By the time of his death, he was largely forgotten. I had assumed that when critics dismissed my work, the same thing would happen to me, that the public would forget about me. How mad is that? Eventually I would have to face the music, go back to performing, the long-awaited Ballyhood reunion tour, gypsy tours, changing ideologies like tires, like shoes, like guitar strings. What's the difference? As long as my own form of certainty stayed intact, I owed nobody nothing. I wasn't going to go deeper into the darkness for anybody. I was already living in the darkness. My family was my light, and I was going to protect that light at all cost. That was where my dedication was, first, last, and everything in between. What did I owe the rest of the world? Nothing. Not a damn thing. The press? I figured you'd lie to it. For the public eye, I went into the bucolic and mundane as far as possible. In my real life, I got to do the things that I loved best, and that was all that mattered. The Little League games, birthday parties, taking my kids to school, camping trips, boating, rafting, canoeing, fishing. I was living on record royalties. In reality, I was imperceptible, my image, that is. Sometime in the past, I had written and performed songs that were most original and most influential, and I didn't know if I ever would again, and I didn't care.